Did you make yourself comfortable? Good. Come cuddle up to me. You know how it goes. Let me tuck you in. There you go. All nice and cozy. Are you ready for a new bedtime story? I know that's what you came here for, didn't you? Alright. I prepared a special one today. An old tale. A legend. I'm sure you've heard of King Arthur before. Do you mind if I tell you how his story begins? Alright. Close your eyes. Rest your head. And let me take you away into the old legend of King Arthur. Chapter 1. Arthur's birth and how he became king. Long years ago, there ruled over Britain a king called Uther Pendragon. A mighty prince was he, and feared by all men. Yet, when he sought the love of the fair Igraine of Cornwall, she would not want anything to do with him, so that, from grief and disappointment, Uther fell sick, and at last seemed like to die. Now, in those days, there lived a famous magician named Merlin, so powerful that he could change his form at will, or even make himself invisible. Nor was there a place so remote that he could not reach it at once, merely by wishing himself there. One day, suddenly, he stood at Uther's bedside and said, "Sir King, I know you grieve, and I am ready to help you. Only promise to give me, at his birth, the son that shall be born to you, and you shall have your heart's desire." To this the king agreed joyfully, and Merlin kept his word. For he gave Uther the form of one of whom Igraine had loved dearly, and so she took him willingly for her husband. When the time had come that a child should be born to the king and queen, Merlin appeared before Uther to remind him of his promise, and Uther swore it should be as he had said. 3 days later, a prince was born, and, with pomp and ceremony, was christened by the name of Arthur. But immediately thereafter, the king commanded that the child should be carried to the postern gate, there to be given to the old man who would be found waiting without. Not long after, Uther again fell sick, and he knew that his end was come. So, by Merlin's advice, he called together his knights and barons, and said to them, "My death draws near. I charge you, therefore, that you obey my son even as you have obeyed me. And my curse upon him, if he claim not the crown when he is a man grown." Then the king turned his face to the wall and died. Scarcely was Uther laid in his grave before disputes arose. Few of the nobles had seen Arthur or even heard of him, and not one of them would have been willing to be ruled by a child. Rather, each thought himself fitted to be king, and strengthening his own castle, made war on his neighbors until confusion alone was supreme, and the poor groaned because there was none to help them. Now, when Merlin carried Arthur away, for Merlin was the old man who had stood at the postern gate, he had known all that would happen, and had taken the child to keep him safe from the fierce barons, until he should be of age to rule wisely and well, and perform all the wonders prophesied of him. He gave the child to the care of the good knight, Sir Ector, to bring up with his son Kay, but revealed not to him that it was the son of Uther Pendragon that was given into his charge. At last, when years had passed, and Arthur was grown a tall youth, well skilled in knightly exercises, Merlin went to the Archbishop of Canterbury, and advised him that he should call together at Christmas time all the chief men of the realm to the great cathedral in London. For, said Merlin, there shall be seen a great marvel, by which it shall be made clear to all men who is the lawful king of this land. The Archbishop did as Merlin counselled. Under pain of a fearful curse, he bade the barons and knights come to London to keep the feast, and to pray heaven to send peace to the realm. The people hastened to obey the Archbishop's commands, and from all sides barons and knights came riding in to keep the birth feast of their lord. And when they had prayed and were coming forth from the cathedral, they saw a strange sight. There, in the open space before the church, stood on a great stone an anvil thrust through with a sword, and on the stone were written these words: "Whoso can draw forth this sword is rightful king of Britain born." At once there were fierce quarrels, each man clamoring to be the first to try his fortune, none doubting his success. Then the Archbishop decreed that each should make the venture in turn, from the greatest baron to the least knight, and each in turn, having put forth his utmost strength, failed to move the sword 1 inch, and drew back ashamed. So the Archbishop dismissed the company, and having appointed guards to watch over the stone, sent messengers through all the land to give word of great jousts to be held in London at Easter, when each knight could give proof of his skill and courage, and try whether the adventure of the sword was for him. Among those who rode to London at Easter was the good Sir Ector, and with him his son, Sir Kay, newly made a knight, and the young Arthur. When the morning came that the jousts should begin, Sir Kay and Arthur mounted their horses and set out for the lists. But before they reached the field, Kay looked and saw that he had left his sword behind. Immediately, Arthur turned back to fetch it for him, only to find the house fast shut, for all were gone to view the tournament. Sore vexed was Arthur, fearing lest his brother Kay should lose his chance of gaining glory, till, of a sudden, he bethought him of the sword in the great anvil before the cathedral. There he rode with all speed, and the guards having deserted their post to view the tournament, there was none to forbid him the adventure. He leaped from his horse, seized the hilt, and instantly drew forth the sword as easily as from a scabbard. Then, mounting his horse, and thinking no marvel of what he had done, he rode after his brother and handed him the weapon. When Kay looked at it, he saw at once that it was the wondrous sword from the stone. In great joy he found his father, and showing it to him, said, "Then must I be king of Britain." But Sir Ector bade him say how he came by the sword, and when Sir Kay told how Arthur had brought it to him, Sir Ector bent his knee to the boy and said, "Sir, I perceive that you are my king, and here I tender you my homage." And Kay did as his father. Then the three sought the archbishop, to whom they related all that had happened, and he, much marveling, called the people together to the great stone, and bade Arthur thrust back the sword and draw it forth again in the presence of all, which he did with ease. But an angry murmur arose from the barons, who cried that what a boy could do, a man could do. So, at the archbishop's word, the sword was put back, and each man, whether baron or knight, tried in his turn to draw it forth, and failed. Then, for the third time, Arthur drew forth the sword. Immediately there arose from the people a great shout. "Arthur is king! Arthur is king! We will have no king but Arthur." And, though the great barons scowled and threatened, they fell on their knees before him, while the archbishop placed the crown upon his head, and swore to obey him faithfully, as their lord and sovereign. Thus Arthur was made king, and to all he did justice, righting wrongs and giving to all their dues, nor was he forgetful of those that had been his friends. For Kay, whom he loved as a brother, he made seneschal and chief of his household, and to Sir Ector, his foster father, he gave broad lands. Chapter 2. The Round Table. Thus Arthur was made king. He had to fight for his own. For 11 great knights drew together and refused to acknowledge him as their lord. And chief amongst the rebels was King Lot of Orkney, who had married Arthur's sister. By Merlin's advice, Arthur sent for help overseas, to Ban and Bors, the 2 great kings who ruled in Gaul. With their aid, he overthrew his foes in a great battle near the river Trent. And then he passed with them into their own lands and helped them drive out their enemies. So, there was ever great friendship between Arthur and the kings Ban and Bors, and all their kindred, and afterward some of the most famous knights of the Round Table were of that kin. Then King Arthur set himself to restore order throughout his kingdom. To all who would submit and amend their evil ways, he showed kindness. But those who persisted in oppression and wrong he removed, putting in their places others who would deal justly with the people. And because the land had become overrun with forest during the days of misrule, he cut roads through the thickets, that no longer wild beasts and men, fiercer than the beast, should lurk in their gloom, to the harm of the weak and defenseless. Thus it came to pass that soon the peasant ploughed his fields in safety, and where had been wastes, men dwelt again in peace and prosperity. Among the lesser kings, whom Arthur helped to rebuild their towns and restore order, was King Leodegrance of Camelot. Now Leodegrance had one fair child, his daughter Guinevere, and from the first he saw her, Arthur gave her all his love. So he sought counsel of Merlin, his chief adviser. Merlin heard the king sorrowfully, and he said, "Sir King, when a man's heart is set, he may not change. Yet had it been well if he had loved another." So the king sent his knights to Leodegrance to ask of him his daughter, and Leodegrance consented, rejoicing to wed her to so good and knightly a king. With great prompt the princess was conducted to Canterbury, and there the king met her, and the two were wed by the archbishop in the great cathedral, amid the rejoicings of the people. On that same day did Arthur found his Order of the Round Table, the fame of which was to spread throughout Christendom and endure through all time. Now, the Round Table had been made for King Uther Pendragon by Merlin, but after Uther died, King Leodegrance had possessed it. But when Arthur was wed, he sent it to him as a gift, and great was the king's joy at receiving it. 150 knights might take their place about it, and for them Merlin made sieges or seats. 128 did Arthur knight at that great feast. Thereafter, if any sieges were empty, at the high festival of Pentecost, new knights were ordained to fill them, and by magic was the name of each knight found inscribed in letters of gold. One seat only long remained unoccupied, and that was the siege Perilous. No knight might occupy it until the coming of Sir Galahad, for, without danger to his life, none might sit there who was not free from all stain of sin. With pomp and ceremony did each knight take upon him the vows of true knighthood, to obey the king, to show mercy to all who asked it, to defend the weak, and for no worldly gain to fight in a wrongful cause. And all the knights rejoiced together, doing honor to Arthur and to his queen. Then they rode forth to right the wrong and help the oppressed, and by their aid the king held his realm in peace, doing justice to all. It's an old tale. It's a tale written a long time ago. I hope you still liked it. If you want to know how it continues, just ask me for it. I'll gladly read.